Into order. Just a friendly reminder for everybody that's new in the room that the microphones are always hot. If you need to cough or something like that, there is a button that you can push on there. And we'll go from there. So the first thing on the agenda is roll call. Would you like to handle that, please, Lisa?
Blessum,
Here.
Burlingame,
Here.
Dykeman,
Here.
Mathested, Olson,
Here.
Schuler,
Here.
Staley,
Here.
Zablotny,
Here.
Zeltinger.
Here.
Okay, so everybody got binders at their spot tonight with the different information that's in there, and included in there is the current Human Relations Committee ordinance, which is what we agreed last time we would use to start this meeting in order to begin to go through it and find modifications and whatever else. And as you can see, the first item on the agenda is Article 1, which is the name. So I will look to the committee for anybody that has any suggestions on how to move forward with that.
Chairman Burlingame, actually, I realize where the agenda is set up and that we're heading straight into it with the assumption that we're going through the whole process. I'd actually like to start us off tonight with a motion that I'll distribute here. This motion, actually referring back to the resolution that was passed, and thank you for bringing that to the city council. I think that was an important step and something that had to be done to get things on the right track. In the resolution that was brought back, part of that said that we would take a look at whether this portion of the ordinance should exist, and if so, what any adjustments should be. And so with that in mind, I'd like to start us off with a discussion that looks at the ordinance as a whole and helps us talk through the idea of what should this be? Should it be in law in the first place? What are the reasonings behind? There's tons of human relations, human rights commissions across this entire country. There's lots to read about, lots to look at. I've done a lot of that. And I'd like us to have a discussion around whether this should be in our law in the first place. And so that is my motion.
So do you want to read the recommendation that you have on here, and that'll be your motion? Is that okay?
Absolutely, yep, I can do that. So I move that we adopt the following report to the Minot City Council to be presented at the Tuesday, September 5th, 2023 regular meeting. The report would read as follows. Mayor Ross, President Pittner, and members of the Minot City Council. The members of the Ad Hoc Committee, Human Relations Committee, have completed their deliberations and have agreed to the following recommendation to the Minot City Council. It is recommended that the Minot City Council repeal the entirety of Chapter 2, Article 5, Division 4 of the Code of Ordinances of Minot, North Dakota, titled Human Relations Committee. It is further recommended that the Ad Hoc Committee, Human Relations Committee, be discontinued as it has completed its work. The Ad Hoc Committee does not make this recommendation lightly. While there are many reasons for the city and its residents to promote Minot and to make it a place that is safe and welcoming for all, we do not believe that a Human Relations Committee is the best path forward for the city.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second discussion.
So if I could, I'd like to lead us off. So I've made it no secret throughout that I don't believe that this is the role of government, that this is the right path for us to go forward. I think that there's a lot of, I guess, history over the last 4 months that have gone into this process and have gotten us to where we are today. I'd like to just focus on a couple things. Number one, city governments really exist to provide for parks and rec services, police and fire departments, housing services, emergency medical services, municipal courts, transportation, public works. As I've gone back and taken a look at Fargo and
Citing
Bismarck.
from something? Are you citing from something?
Oh, let's let him finish and then we'll come back, okay? Go ahead.
Okay. I've taken a look at a bunch of meetings from both Fargo and Bismarck. I think it's very clear where the committees in those areas are focused. I don't think it's any question that they are there to promote a particular political agenda. I think if you review the footage, if you review the work that they do, there's no question that that's what that is. Over the last couple of months, I've reviewed 5 of the Bismarck committee meetings, the last 5. They've been almost exclusively focused on LGBTQ issues. Fargo's had a more diverse topic set that they're addressing, but again, it's still related to housing, race, economic status, things that are very important to a certain sector of the society, but no doubt political in nature. No question about that at all. Many of those topics are valid and should be taken up by city government when they intersect with one of the primary public services. So if we've got housing discrimination going on, we've got a housing authority that can take a look at that. City council could be engaged if the housing authority is having issues that show up in that manner. Issues with housing, transportation, public safety should be taken up by city staff under the direction of the city manager instead of trying to use a volunteer group of unelected committee members to handle these topics. Based on these committees in Fargo and Bismarck, I think it's safe to say that the committees of this type typically follow a path that promotes left-wing ideology in the city. This gives this ideology the weight of law and allows the government to be used to place a hand on the scale. Minot has a vibrant set of nonprofit organizations that have proven themselves ready and willing to step up and meet the needs of a diverse population. In the absence of a human relations committee, we have navigated the amazing circumstances of the last couple of decades, from flooding to oil booms and pandemics. We grew in size and brought in people from all over the world. We've had Air Force men and women from all walks of life across our great nation called Minot home since 1957. The people of Minot have safe and welcoming built into who we are. In my opinion, this is not the role for government. This is not the role for an unelected board as a branch of government to be doing in the city. I think the people of the city do it on their own, and I think that we should support them in doing that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. Who else would like to comment on this?
Mr. Chairman? I would like to comment.
I heard Miranda first, and then we'll go to Denise next, and then to Lisa.
Well, I agree with Mr. Blessum on the limited role of government wholeheartedly. I may or may not appreciate his motion and may someday support it or not support it. I feel like we laid out a schedule for the citizens of Minot on how we were going to attack this. And if we were to pass this, it will give an air of a lack of transparency for the citizens by sending it straight back to City Council. And I believe the schedule that we laid out gives the citizens the ability to come in and voice their concerns on this, and lets us talk about it and make a very educated suggestion to the council.
Ms. Dykeman?
Thank you. First, I'd like to point out that this discussion of the role of government is not on our agenda. Second, I said in the other meeting that I disagreed with your characterization of the role of government. Thank you.
There you go.
Is that better? Okay. The purpose of government is expressed pretty clearly in the preamble to our Constitution, where it says, "We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity." Right? That's what our government is for here in the United States. And so promoting the general welfare is something that this committee can do and help to foster a sense of belonging and respect for the citizens of Minot that live here, right? These are important things to do. Why? Just yesterday, I was taking a training on suicide and youth suicide put on by Nexus Path, which is a foster care provider here in North Dakota. A huge contributing factor in suicide and youth suicide is a feeling that people don't belong, right? This is directly related to public welfare in the city of Minot. And I think it's very important for us to have a committee like this, which can consider the views of different people in the city, what their experiences are, and how we can make them feel more involved in their city, more like they belong, like they're respected, like they have a place here. We should be concerned about people's security, like police and fire and things like that. We should be concerned about their economic well-being, that's true. And also the sense of belonging, respect, and people's autonomy, right? We should be concerned about the liberty of all people, and that includes their civil rights. We do have an obligation to care about our citizens' civil rights in Minot. Thank you.
Alderwoman Olson?
Yeah, well, thank you, Scott. And to respond to Mike's motion, we're in agreement on one part of this. I believe that we should repeal the ordinance, and following the vote on this, if it is voted down, I actually do have a suggestion. During one of our city council meetings, Alderman Janser recommended the repeal of the ordinance and then offered a new writing of that ordinance. It was not given much time because ultimately a different motion was made, which thus created this committee. And I would like us to look at Alderman Janser's recommendations and see if that is something that is more appealing and appropriate in 2023 for this committee to recommend to the city council. I would agree with what others have said too. I just feel committed to doing the work. I don't want to just do it halfway and walk away from it, because there has been a lot of time invested by people at this dais, by people who've been in the audience, and we agreed when we were appointed to this committee that we would do the work and bring a recommendation. And it's, in my opinion, too early to give up on that work.
Mr. Blessum? Oh, Christine, were you trying to, go ahead, Christine, I'm sorry.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, guys. I want to say, first of all, I know this is my first meeting, and I might be a little rusty about how this is transactioned, but I gave a thought about the last meeting and looked over some of the stuff, and I'm really on the same page with all three of the women who just spoke, but I'm also on this fact that I looked at what the name was called, the Relations Committee. Take out, everything else. How do people relate? This is a committee that's like a segue into other bigger issues. And I feel like if we were to not take the time to consider all of the problems that our community faces, then we're going to have bigger problems in the future. This is a very hot button issue in the whole country, in my opinion. And I just don't think we've really given thought. And if we are going to be a city of the future, we really need to consider every aspect. And I understand the resources, Mr. Blessum, that you're referring to, but this is volunteer, and I guess I could have declined if I didn't want to be here, but I do want to be here. And I think it's an important issue. And I just want to say that I do want to do the work. And I think it's only right and only fair, and I think they need to have a voice. This is the only way to have it.
And if you want to go ahead, Travis?
Go ahead, Travis.
If I may, the role of government is highly subjective and can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. I think the role of government's place is to provide for an orderly, lawful society that respects each other and individuals, but it's certainly not its place to decide how that happens in any other form than under law. So if our intention with this group is not to create law, then we are being very subjective about what we're doing. Things that are brought forth to us, we're operating outside of law, and that's not how government should function. It shouldn't be a group of people that picks their own winners and losers and picks their own choices. That's for society to deal with in the number of ways that it does currently. In all of those issues, whether it be through the church, whether it be through other types of support services, counseling, things that happen outside of government. And again, I don't believe that it's government's role in support of this motion to be involved in this at all unless we're prepared to create law or ordinance that's enforceable. And that I'm not in favor of in this realm.
No, Mr. Blessum.
Okay. So just to answer a couple things, I realize, and I'm sensitive to the fact that I've now come into the first two meetings that we've had, and it feels like I've disrupted everything and thrown us off track. I want everybody to understand what that is. I am not doing that because I don't want to put in the time, Ms. Daly. I am absolutely prepared to do whatever it takes to be on this committee and to see it through to the end. But in my opinion, the things that you just brought up are super important for us to understand going in. I'm in a position today where I don't see this as a need. I see what's going on in the other ones, and I don't see it as a good path for our city. If I understood more, we've had people at the podium during city council meetings talking about feeling unsafe. We've had them talking about feeling unwelcome. I need to understand that more. I have to. And that's why I want this discussion. I don't think we can go directly into what's the name of the new committee out the back end when I don't even understand what we're trying to respond to. It sounds like, in your opinion, we have major issues that we need to deal with in the Minot area. as a long, I've lived here almost all of my 49 years. I don't see that. I don't. I mean, if I may be completely misled, I may not see the things that are out there, but I need to see them. And that's the discussion we need to have before we start ticking off the boxes, writing a new ordinance. I don't even know what we're trying to do. And so my point with bringing this motion is not that we would pass it as it's written today. I appreciate Miranda's words on that, you know, there's going to be open discussion throughout. But I brought this because we have to have that discussion. I realize we don't have people here to talk at the podium today about that. And I realize that we're a little off track with that. And I'm open to that, to making sure that that occurs. So I just want to be clear about what I'm trying to do. If there was a vote to do this right now, great. That is my ultimate aim. But at the same time, I'd really like to hear from everybody. I've heard them. I've heard people at the podium say, I was walking down Main Street with my partner and I didn't feel safe or I didn't feel welcome. What does that mean? Help me understand that.
I don't know who's first, so we're going to go with Diane first because I heard you first.
I just raised my hand so you wouldn't have heard me anyway.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I've been sitting here listening now since April 1st, or for beginning of April, and I agree with Mike, I agree with Lisa, I agree with Miranda, I agree with Travis. I agree with Christine,
It's okay.
and with Denise. This is a huge issue, and I too, I was to every meeting, I heard the same thing. I didn't hear what didn't make them feel safe. Was it somebody attacked them, or is it something that, so we need to know that. We need to have the definitions of what safe and welcoming is. We need to know where we want to go with this committee. I've looked at 12 different human relation commissions and human relation committees. None of them are the same. And I don't know that any one of them would fit Minot. But I don't want to jump in and give a name to something where I don't know where I'm going with the goals and purposes. I would love to hear from everybody who feels unsafe, but more importantly, what actions have happened that make them unsafe. Actions are something that the government can deal with. Feelings, you could never make me feel good around a snake. I don't care how long you did it. I couldn't do it, but I know how to behave around a snake, or I know what actions. So there has to be something where we are working on a common goal and duking it out. This ad hoc committee is far more workable than how it started out last week. There were just too many questions to even begin asking to follow through. And I would like to see, we start at the beginning. Yes, people are not here. People have never said we haven't said they can't be here. They were here for the 4 months, April, whatever it was, April, May, June, July. I would love to hear where that discrimination is, what the actions are, because that should be taken care of now. It should have been taken care of in April, not now here in August and September and October. If there are acts of discrimination or acts against whomever, something because they have a wheelchair, and I will discuss that later, but those are the things that I think we can do as a government. Feelings, that has to come from inside. I have to feel better about myself. I can't ask the city to do that.
Ms. Dykman.
Thank you. So on these points, I mean, I'm glad that you haven't experienced this kind of thing, but a lot of people have, right? And like, for example, and I'm not just talking about, people who feel unsafe in the community perhaps, but like, let's think about accessibility. Like, are there things that our citizens need to make their public spaces more accessible? For example, I have hearing impairment, so it's really important for me to be able to see your face when I'm talking to you so that I can understand you. Because of the way this dais is built, when I'm sitting down there, I can't always see your mouth, But how are you going to know that unless there's a place for me to bring that to you, right? If you're walking down Broadway on the west side of the street and you're in a wheelchair and you're just cruising down the sidewalk, what's going to happen? Does anybody know? You're going to run into a stop because of the bridge, and there's no place to cross the street there, right? That's something we could do something about, right? We could put a crosswalk there, right, if we know about it. But if we don't know what we don't know and we're not willing to find out, then we can't make things better for people. I also started to do some research into what the problems might be here in North Dakota. I found the U.S. Commission on Human Rights has a report prepared by the North Dakota Advisory Committee that I would recommend checking out. I still need to do more research into this myself, but some of their recommendations and conclusions from this report include that employment, housing, and other areas of discrimination are commonplace in North Dakota. Anti-discrimination provisions of the North Dakota Human Rights Act are not well publicized and not readily known by the general public. That's another thing that we could do. We could do education to educate our citizens about what the federal laws are and what the North Dakota laws are so that they know how to stand up for themselves and avail themselves of these rules, right? Easy enough. And that the act's effectiveness is reduced because of the absence of a single state agency to enforce the act. They also found the state provides inadequate financial resources to the North Dakota Department of Labor to investigate and resolve complaints, and violations of the state statute must be taken to district court for remediation. Now, not everybody can just go to district court, right? So there are barriers to our people being able to take their complaints to these state and federal levels. And there's other findings in the report, but I don't want to take up too much more of your time, just to know that, I have done this research and there are problems in this state and here in Minot.
Ms.
Thank
Daly?
you. Thank you. I would like to also add that I know you had mentioned having people come up, but how young can they come up? Because I know that there's young people right now being discriminated against, and I know this because my daughter had an issue just recently, and she came home and told me, and I said that is not okay, and it was something that was taking place in a library, but she didn't have the right tools to go to someone to understand what to do, and I said to her, "Why did you not leave?" And she didn't even know what to do. She's only 12 years old. So if we want to welcome anybody to come up and talk, bring them. But I don't know if they're going to come that young. So I think this is the work we need to do. So when they do get confident enough to come speak in front of the public, they won't feel inadequate or insecure, and they'll be able to have a voice. We'll understand. And again, it doesn't matter whatever the situation is. It's just people feeling like they're being heard. And if we don't stand for anything, we're going to fall for everything. And so at least we can stand for something and show that. That's why I feel like this is the bridge to that gap.
Thank you. I was just raising my hand and I realized I get to actually decide when I talk. So I want to just point out too that we're having a fantastic conversation here and it's absolutely appropriate considering the motion on table. But this group is an ad hoc committee set up to determine the future. So this group is probably not going to be the group where the voices are going to come forward and where people are going to want to come to. I think that's probably getting off of a little bit of the resolution that was passed at the last city council meeting. The work of this group is to make a determination, A, whether or not to continue, and then B, if we do continue, what does it look like? And a lot of what you guys are talking about now are perhaps the kind of things that we want to include in that recommendation. So I think they're appropriate conversations, but I want to make sure that nobody here is expecting this to sort of turn into those public forums. One of the things that I do know from my professional experience is the more people have to tell their stories, especially if it's trauma-related stories, the more they can be sort of re-victimized. So the last thing I ever want to do is to create an opportunity for people to come forward and tell us something if we're not the right place for people to be telling these stories. So I just think that's very important to make sure that we stay focused on the council's assignment to this committee. So go ahead, Eric.
If I may, going back to the fundamentals of the question, and I think it's a good conversation to have with regards to what is the role of government. And I wish sometimes that we as a governmental body had that discussion more often on many issues that we have brought before us and that we talk about and make decisions on. So I think that's a good fundamental question. I will say, though, however, that answering what the role of government is can sometimes be a tough question to answer. If we simply look at the city government as providing infrastructure and specific services, which has traditionally been what's been looked at for the role of government. I think over time, and particularly over the last couple decades, we've seen some challenges with that. And based off of that, I think we've begun to see a trend of an importance at the local level, at your city government level, or maybe even your county government level, the need to start addressing social infrastructure, because it has an impact, because we're seeing that boil up within our communities across the country, whether that's the Me Too movement, the issues that happened in Ferguson, and those kinds of things. I've sat in several similar meetings to this in a few different communities. And while maybe North Dakota and might not have not experienced this directly, I don't know that that means that we don't start having some that we don't learn from what's happening in other communities across the country, and we try to do something we can handle this better and be preventative, that we don't have those problems come to our community. For example, when I was in Missouri, Ferguson, the issues that happened in Ferguson was in the state. And we had a lot of communities across the state that had conversations about how and why that happened. And I had the opportunity to sit in meetings with African American populations that said the reason why sometimes we react this way, and even violently, is because we have no other way that we feel that we can interact with government and be heard. This is the only way we can get our attention and to get people to pay attention to us. And ultimately, I think what's coming through this is a lot of communities and governments are finding that social infrastructure is important, and we need to put a mechanism in place to make sure that everyone in our community has a way that they feel that they can bring issues forward and be heard. And those are being created in the form of transitioning what was previously the human rights or relations commissions away from being what I talked about last time, with being a board that has ability to investigate things and issue sanctions and those kinds of things, to focusing more on the relation. How do we build social capital? How do we build social infrastructure within our community in a purposeful and meaningful way? Again, I'll provide an example in Missouri, in the previous community I was in. We had a great university there. And one of the ways, as they struggled to compete for students and those kinds of things, the way they began to address that is they became very attractive to students from the country of India to come in and receive their education. Well, we ran into some cultural issues there. Our landlords were having problems and challenges and issues, and the students were having problems and challenges and issues. And it was becoming a community issue because it impacted the community. It was requiring more additional services and responses from the city as a government, and it was creating challenges and issues for everyone involved. And so creating a venue where the community could have a meaningful conversation about that was important. And so while traditionally maybe something like this may not be what we've construed as the role of government across the country, I think we're finding that more and more that we need to adapt and put those things in. We're having meetings talking about workforce issues. Why can't we get people to come to Minot, North Dakota, or to the state of North Dakota to work here? The communities that are being attractive to workforce growth and development are the ones who are taking steps like this of making sure that they're building social infrastructure and social capital within their community. And I would advise the community of Minot to consider seriously how we do that. And I'm fine if maybe we don't do it the same as everybody else does, but I hope that we do it better than everyone else does. Because what I heard as we sat through these meetings is what I've heard in other communities beforehand of, I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, and I don't know where to go to be seen and heard. And they're reaching out to their local government to help come up with a solution for that. And so I personally believe that government does have a role in this conversation, that we have an investment in creating social infrastructure to make sure that we're a community that people want to come and live and work in and be a part of. And we need a place that people can come and be seen and heard and have these conversations, and we can do it in a meaningful and a safe way for our community.
Okay, we got Mike and then Travis.
Okay, the city manager, I think, I appreciate what you said a lot, Harold. I think that one of the cautions I would have for everybody is that I think that one of the reasons why we're in a world where people are looking to their government to solve those types of things is because the government has tried to take over many of those things. As an example, we have decided as a society, for the most part now, that we take care of those who have less by filtering money through our government bureaucracy and back to them, rather than taking care of our neighbor next to us or down the street or in our church or in our social group. We've decided that government is the answer to most of our questions. And as we head down that path further, I would caution us that we don't do that. That's a scary path because it gives plenty of people out there a perfect pass to say, well, look, I pay my taxes. I don't have to do that. I would tell everybody, though, that's not who Minot is. If you guys remember during the flood, you remember how crazy people thought it was across this country that our shelters were empty. We had 10,000 people out of their homes and our shelters were empty. How does that happen? It happens because the people of Minot, by nature, take care of the people around them. They do that naturally. We should be looking to each other. We should be looking within our families, our churches, our organizations within the community, not to our government to solve it, because I get a little bit scared that then our elected officials have to decide what's right and wrong. What's the right way to approach things rather than the social structures that existed prior to government becoming so important in our lives. And so while I agree that that is where things have gone, I disagree that we should allow it to continue here. And I think that we should revisit that. A couple other things that I wanted to bring up because they've been brought up by other members of the team. And by the way, I appreciate this so much. This is the conversation that I wanted. This is what I wanted to do because I am happy to do the work of going through the ordinance, but I wanted to make sure that we understood each other and what we're actually talking about. One of the questions that was brought up was accessibility issues. For me, that's a huge deal. I have very close friends that have accessibility issues, and that's an important thing for people around town. Do we not have the infrastructure in place to make sure we understand their needs today? The city manager, Harold, I believe on the city website, we have a request form for exactly that type of thing today. We have, at the end of every city council meeting, you are able to come to the podium. I realize not everybody's going to be up to that. I understand that. But there are mechanisms. And if there aren't, the council needs to take that up. That's a very specific issue under the law that really, that shouldn't take this group to deal with at all. Okay, so that's one comment. I do think that there are other types of issues. Like I think the housing world can get interesting. But again, I think it's super important, whether it's called the Minot Housing Authority or a housing commission, whatever that is. I worked running apartments. I was an owner in a property management company for over 4 years. I understand that very clearly. You know, you have the group that would come in and test us to make sure that we weren't discriminating against people. That works very, very well, by the way. There's very important issues out there, but the commissions and the city infrastructure we have in place today takes care of a lot of that. And so I feel like what this ends up boiling down to is the issue of the day. I don't think in Minot is race. I don't think it's disability issues, although if there are some, they should sure be brought forward. I don't think it's age discrimination. I don't think it's those pieces. I think we're talking about a specific portion of society today that is feeling wronged, and I don't doubt that they are, but I do want to understand that. I want to make sure that if we're heading forward down that direction, because again, as I mentioned before, Bismarck just spent 5 straight meetings with every topic on LGBTQ issues, every single one. That, I mean, literally, they were talking about, should we paint the crosswalk stripes in rainbow colors? And then the question was, well, is that just during Pride Month, or should that be all the time, or where should we go with that? Is that the topics we're actually talking about, or is it all of the above?
Travis, I am getting close to where I'm going to want to vote on this because we've talked about it a lot and it's been fantastic conversation, but go ahead, Travis.
Just a follow-up question, I guess, with Harold's comments. very ambiguous to me about what exactly, if, you didn't give us any examples about what is it that people aren't being seen and heard about, and they don't have an opportunity to do that. It's up here, again, it goes back to what types of issues are we really talking about? What are these things that are, you have any examples you can share?
Well, I think the answer to that is simple. I mean, read the newspaper over the last several years. In my lifetime, I've grown up, I spent 6 months as a missionary in Los Angeles, California, in the area where the Rodney King riots happened. I watched the riots in Chicago. I watched the Ferguson issue. I watched the issue in Minnesota. I'm getting tired of talking about those things, and we as a society aren't really making any substantive change to deal with that. And again, when I sit in a meeting, not here, but in other places, there's this increasing frustration with regards to racial discrimination or, women feeling discriminated against. We have LGBTQ plus issues that continue to come forward. And they don't feel accepted or seen or heard within our communities. And there's no safe place for them to go and have that conversation. And so again, when I hear, even as we sat through the several council meetings, of people coming forward, in my opinion, when they say, I don't feel safe, I interpret that based off of my years of experience living in several different communities in several states and those kinds of things as, I don't feel accepted here. And so I think we need to create an avenue, a mechanism that they can come voice their concerns and their issues. And if there's changes that we need to do as a community, then that can happen. Now, at the end of the day, if you can create a way that can be done without the city of Minot as a government creating that, I'm all for that. Trust me, I would love to do other things with my evening than sit here in an additional meeting after I already put in a 9-hour day or a 10-hour day. So I'm not looking for reasons to create more meetings and more responsibility for the city, especially when I just talked to the council about, we're having a hard time continuing to maintain the services we're already providing. But at the same time, I understand the social impacts that these types of issues are having on communities across the country. Whether it's riots, shootings, suicides, opioid addictions, they're all coming back to being linked with regards to social links back to the community.
One key word that you mentioned that this committee needs to understand, and that is the issues and what acceptance means. Regardless of what that is, we have to determine what acceptance is, because I'm going to tell you that all people will not accept all things, regardless of what side of whatever issue it is you're on. So that was my very first comment at one of these first meetings, is that we're not all going to agree, and government's not going to force us all to agree, because we all have different biases, backgrounds, beliefs, and we're going to have to sort that out.
And I agree with that, and I think Leanne made that point very well when she said that she'll never feel safe or comfortable with a snake, right? But I know a lot of people who love snakes and have pet snakes and poisonous snakes and all kinds of things. They have no fear of them at all. And when I say the term, and I want to clarify, when I say the term acceptance, it isn't necessarily that we necessarily agree with that. But I think at the end of the day, as a society and as a community, people have to know that whether we agree with what they're doing or how they choose to exercise their freedoms, that they can be a part of our community.
Can I add one thing?
Right.
I would say, look at this committee. If you don't think there's an issue, look, we're all white, right? We're all able-bodied. Is there a person of color on this committee? A Native American from the community? No. Is everybody Christian here? Is there anybody who isn't? I mean, we've got to address and include everybody in our government. And everybody needs to feel like they can participate and be part of this. Is everybody, I mean,
They had an opportunity to
Hold on,
apply.
though. Wait till you're recognized, please.
I'm done. I think I've made my point.
Can I just make one point? Is that I think
Travis did talk, so I'm gonna let him go, but please, you guys, wait till you're recognized by the chair before you speak. Go ahead.
My only comment was they had an opportunity to apply. This is the body that applied, with one exception. And so if those issues exist out there, they had the same opportunity to be on this board as the rest of us.
Mr.
Christine?
Chair,
They weren't
I had
selected.
I
Christine
might make
next.
a motion.
Can I just piggyback off of that, what he said, but also mentioning, you were saying something how earlier, Mike, that, you know, people should have understanding of where to go in the government for certain issues if they have an issue. We have already groups for certain things. I feel like then that's what essentially what that is that we don't do a good job as a city then explaining that to everybody and promoting it. Because it's either it's on Facebook or people watch news, and some people don't do those things. They don't do either. I know people who don't have even a social media account at all. So how are we getting the word out? How are we figuring out where to go? You know, I can tell you right now, one of my employees who's been with me forever doesn't even have a social media account. So when I would post something from my shop, he has no idea what's going on. I have to like brief him and show it to him. Like clueless. Sorry, just true.
All right. Ms. Schuler, did you have a motion?
I move we call the previous question.
Okay, can you help me out, Madam Parliamentarian? So when there's a call of a question, do we need a second for that?
You do not. You can just call a question.
Okay, so I will call the question. So with that, we'll do a roll call vote, please.
Blessum,
Yes.
Burlingame,
No.
Dykeman,
No,
Olson,
No.
Schuler,
No.
Staley,
No.
Zablotny,
Yes.
Zeltinger.
Yes.
Motion fails.
Okay, so the motion fails. So now we're going to return to the agenda, and that's going back to all the different things we just talked about a little bit. I like to think that I was elected to city council to get things done, and one of the things we're going to get done tonight is at least some of this agenda, and we're already 40 minutes into our meeting. We're still on number one. So, our number two, I'm sorry, we got through roll call, okay. So with that, I will go back to asking for anybody that has any motions to make.
Mr. Chair, I move that we call the name of the committee as it stands right now, Human Relations Committee.
So we have a motion to call it Human Relations Committee. Is there a second?
I second.
I'm going to go with Ms. Staley for the second. Sometimes it helps if I'm looking in that direction. Discussion, Mike.
I won't support this motion. It went a little quick. I would have gone a little bit different direction. One of the things I want to make sure of, and I think this is a good time to have the discussion, Harold brought up last time the distinction between human rights, human relations. I think that's a discussion we should have right now to make sure we're all on the same page with that. Fargo is a human rights commission. If anybody likes, I can talk yep, it's called human rights.
That has changed then, okay.
Yep, theirs is a human rights, and they do investigation. They were talking about sending people out to investigate the bus slur that they had on theirs. So I think we should have that discussion. What I would say is I would offer an alternative. Number one, I think we're out of sync between our wording, and I do think we should call it a commission instead of a committee. And the reason for that is under normal usage, committee is usually a subset of the whole body, where a commission is generally outside involved partners. So I think commission fits better. It's not something I'm going to get too crazy over, but if we're going to do that, let's just make sure it's the same throughout the wording. Because right now we refer to a commission and a committee in different places. So I'd like to see us clean that up.
Miranda?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I made the motion because in order for us to have any discussion, we have to have a motion and a second. Discussion cannot happen without those things first. I do not believe we need a human rights committee or commission for that matter. I do believe human relations is the correct wording. And I prefer the word committee. When it looks at the different things, some cities have city commissions, some have committees. I don't think that it's a major issue at all, but the reason the motion was made is so we can have the discussion, and I would not support a human rights committee.
I think I had Lisa first, so go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, well, and I'm going to go back to a statement that I made a few minutes ago in the fact that there was an ordinance rewrite that was suggested to the council. It was not looked at for very long, and that rewrite was presented by Alderman Janser. I know that our city attorney has had at least an opportunity to look through it, And I would recommend that we all look at that. It does have Human Rights Committee as the name, but Human Relations Committee, let me get straight. But it does cover all of our agenda items tonight and everything else. And if we took a few minutes to look at that, I think that it would really clarify a lot of the questions that we have. It's ordinance number 5840, and it is in your binders under Alderman Janser revisions.
Okay, Mr. Mike, sorry.
That's fine. No, all that I was going to mention, and actually, I appreciate what you said, Lisa. This does that well. I would, if we go with committee, I'd just like to see us make sure it's consistent throughout. So we're not using commission and committee
Yep,
interchangeably.
that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
Other discussion on this?
If I may, just that I would agree with staying away from the Human Rights Commission. I'll let the city attorney share her opinion if she wants to, but I don't know that I would recommend that the city gets involved in conducting hearings and issuing junctions and all those other kinds of things. I just don't know that we want to commit to that from a staff perspective and a liability perspective and the time and energy that would take. And that would be one that I would agree is probably not within the realm and the role of local government at this point. I think federal and state governments have systems in there that can handle that adequately. And at the most, I'd recommend that should this go forward, that the local government would have influence in is helping direct and steer anyone within our community to those resources faster.
Do you have a feedbacks, Ms. City Attorney?
No, Chairman Burlingame, I concur with that assessment.
Okay, and I'm going to add in quick, and then we'll go back to you, Travis. I do apologize, the Fargo issue, when I reacted as such. I do remember when Mayor Furness at the time created the Human Relations Commission in Fargo, and his intention was at that time that he wanted it to be a place where people, humans, get together and create and talk about the relationship amongst people. So that has changed since Mayor Furness was in office 20 years ago or whatever. So I apologize for that, but that is also my intention with this, is to stick to the human relations side of things. Go ahead, Travis.
I was just wondering if our city attorney could give us a more clarification on the difference between committee and commission in a definition standpoint.
I mean, I guess there's no definition in this particular ordinance. It's more of a matter of personal preference, really, in this regard. We do have I will say we do have a planning commission. That is a freestanding committee. They're referred to as a commission. Ad hoc committees are typically more creatures that are created for a special purpose by the council, but really in the context of our ordinance, they've been interchangeable.
But in the contents of a proper definition, I mean, are you familiar with what it would be? I'm asking because I don't have that in front of me or don't know what that is. You know, a dictionary definition per se of what a role of a commission versus a committee. Is there a difference?
No, Mr. Zablotny. I mean, they're both a body that's comprised of people that are put together for a certain purpose, and so that's what this ordinance will do. If you want to call it a committee, if you want to call it a commission, either or. I again, like Member Blessum indicated, they should really just be consistent in the term that you're using throughout your document.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I guess I would have the question, do you, as a long-term thought process, do you have a preference one way or the other? If these are coming up before the council over and over, do we want to get in the habit of using one term or the other? Does it make sense to do that? Or are there ad hoc committees or standing commissions as one example of a way to do it? Is there any consistency across the ordinance code that you have any worry about today? Maybe not.
If we're going to really get down into that particular level, because we have a planning commission and that's a separate body, I guess commission in my mind would probably be what I would lean towards. But a commission and a committee, I think at this point we're splitting hairs between the two. It's more as long as it's consistent in the ordinance, what you're creating. I think it makes sense to distinguish between relations and rights, because I think there is some connotation that's attached to those particular words, especially when it comes to rights. You're talking about human rights, civil rights. Those imply a few other connotations rather than human relations. That's how people are getting along. How are we relating to each other? So distinguishing between those two, I think, makes sense, but committee and commission, that I would leave in the purview of this particular body.
Denise first.
Thanks for the discussion. I did take the opportunity to chat with Mr. Barry Nelson, who is on the North Dakota Human Rights Coalition and just came off of 6 years being on the Fargo, what is now Human Rights Commission, to just sort of get his thoughts about, briefly about what we might consider in this realm. And he said that they changed it to the Human Rights Commission intentionally because it's just less vague. The human relations language, he said, was just more vague. Like they weren't there, he said, to do therapy with the city. They were there to, focus on like what are the rights that the citizens have in the city. And so just this past year, they changed it to human rights from human relations. But I think that was an evolution that Fargo had to go through, right? And they drew on their experience. So it was a helpful conversation. He also said that we should probably not use Fargo as a template, but
Yeah, I think that's fair.
anyway, just offering that, I do think that, focusing on human rights identifies those specific rights in federal and North Dakota code and focuses our work a bit. Whether or not we need to have any sort of enforcement authority underneath of it, we can decide. But I thought I would offer that insight from Barry to all of you as we talk about this. And I'm interested in the work moving forward. I'm okay with sort of what we call muddling through in government and finding our way over time too. So I'm okay with it being a human relations committee, but do feel strongly that we need to keep the rights of our citizens in mind as we do this work.
All right, Travis and then Mike.
If I can, I just want to attempt to answer my own question as I did a quick check here as we're talking. One thing that's the same about a committee and a commission is they're both a group of people appointed for a specific function, but there is in the definition a difference. A committee is something typically consisting of members of a larger group. So, a committee that city council sits on, you sit on subcommittees, right, or of the council per se. We are not members of the council, and so I would think we're, from a definition standpoint, we're more a commission. From what I read.
One thing slightly off topic, I just wanted to clarify for everybody. So twice now, and I don't take this personally whatsoever, but twice now I've sort of been accused of being sort of nitpicky with stuff. We're talking about suggesting law to the city council. I will be very nitpicky on the words as we go through. So I want to be clear about that. And I hope, I'm not here to offend anybody. That's not my point, but I will be very picky about the exact word we use because they are important. Words are important. And as you mentioned, the rights versus relations it could be a very big deal for people when they're looking at something like this. And so I will be in the details of the words throughout.
Oh, look, I'm a lawyer. I'm with you.
Go ahead, Denise.
I'm with you.
Wow. I'm just going to comment, an attorney being nitpicky. I can't believe that, Denise. Sorry. All right. Anybody else have? All right. Seeing none, I will call for a vote. Can you remind us what the motion was because I may have forgotten?
The motion is to call this the Human Relations Committee.
Okay. Go ahead and roll call.
Schuler,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Zablotny,
Yes.
Zeltinger,
Yes.
Blessam,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Dykeman,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. There we go. So now I lost my agenda. So next on the agenda is Article 3, the objectives. I will look for a motion, and Ms. Schuler has a motion.
Article 3, as we've all seen in the existing ordinance, addresses the objectives of our committee. And we all have a copy of the revisions that Alderman Janser had made. His would be 2-212, goals and objectives. My motion would be to adopt his language as it's written, and I will read it for those who are watching. The goal and objective of the Human Relations Committee are A, to provide leadership in the areas of civil rights, B, to promote respect for and to identify issues of concern regarding civil rights in Minot and to make recommendations to the City Council, and to encourage adherence to federal and state laws regarding civil rights.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Miranda, would you like to start with why you made that motion?
Yes. So it identifies the fact that we'd be encouraging adherence to current state and federal laws regarding civil rights. We just discussed we will not be a human rights committee or commission for that matter. And the wording is fairly easy to understand. And I think they're good revisions.
Other comments? Travis?
Just, it's word for word as to what he had here, correct?
Exactly is how he has
Go to
it.
the second page, you'll see it
Yeah, I
without
see,
the
yeah.
strikeouts, okay.
I think I missed when I said promote respect for all people. He has that in red.
Scott?
Yes.
And that's an important note that I appreciate, and I think it was something that we heard during a lot of meetings. It's very difficult to start listing people that we are going to respect, because as soon as you list 29, you've forgotten 30. And so when we say all people, it really does mean all people, everyone who lives here, everyone who visits here.
I'd like to say one more thing. Mike, you said words matter, and they do matter. All people incorporates every person. And someone who may be feeling marginalized or not accepted in our community would say the same exact thing, that words matter. Maybe they were called a name by someone, or were not recognized, or felt marginalized in some way. Their words matter as well, just as much as the words in this. So including all people doesn't say any specific group. It could be a group that is yet to be determined in the next 10 to 15 years that didn't exist when this original ordinance was written.
Right.
Like now that exists.
Mike and then Christine.
So to go into point C a little bit, if everybody wants to take a look at that. So if, making the assumption that a committee down the road would have testimony, they'd have people coming in, they'd be having discussions, and they're identifying issues of concern. I think one of the things that we heard as testimony was going on during the city council discussions on this was that, again, the government would be sort of weaponized against people. Whether it's a business owner for not putting the right sticker in their window or something along those lines. And so I don't think that I mind the language that's here. I think that that's probably the best way to put that, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there as something we keep in mind throughout, is that, again, we don't want to, in my mind, we don't want to start saying to people, you better believe this way or else. I think Lyanne said it well before when she said that the action itself is what matters. It's not about what people think, it's about what they actually do and what's performed. And so we want to make sure that we stay in that spot. If they're actively discriminating against somebody, if I said no to somebody that I should have put in an apartment, I deserve to be brought up on charges or fined or whatever that would be. But if there's some reason that somebody believes a certain way, that to me is not the type of issue regarding civil rights that needs to come before the council.
Christine?
I don't know if it's able to be done, but I think I like the way the new goal and objective area is written. However, I would like to make a suggestion when we do include B, to promote respect for all. Can we consider putting all in capital letters, people? Because I feel like, in my opinion, that is a big, high intention that will be inclusive. So when someone comes up and says, well, they don't talk about me or they don't make me feel left in, well, there's a reason we capitalized it. Because I wanted to either boldface it, capitalize it, because I know when I'm reading something, if that pops out to me, I know I have to recognize that. I feel like it makes a statement. It might not be grammatically correct, but I think it'll really make people feel a little bit more understood because it really does pop off the page. That's my suggestion.
Denise?
Does anyone recall why Janser chose civil rights instead of human rights in this language?
Wow.
I don't know.
No, I don't remember that conversation.
That's
either.
actually a great question. Sorry, I don't mean to be surprised that you asked a great question, but I wish I would have thought of it is what I meant.
Well, I think one point on that, maybe it's a discussion for us to have for a moment, because we could certainly adjust. I'll throw my thought quickly on what the difference would be. I mean, and I may be wrong. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. Civil rights are what are coming down through the common experience of the people, through law, through our civil organizations that come together to decide what that looks like. Where human rights, I would like to think, are a step behind that. In many cases, that comes from a spiritual perspective for some people. It may come from a different, I don't know how to explain it for those that don't have a spiritual backing for it, but from another baseline to get there, where civil is that common knowledge that's brought together. And again, off the top of my head, I don't know if there's other ways to think about it.
Travis?
Simplify Mike's attempt to explain this definition. It says human rights are rights one acquires by being alive. Civil rights are rights that one obtains by being a legal member of a certain political state.
Yeah, so I mean, we have.
Hold on, Miranda was up first, sorry.
I want to think about that for a minute.
Okay, go ahead, Denise.
Yeah, so I have the list of human rights that we have here in North Dakota, right? I mean, they're enumerated. It's just not like a moral code or something, right? And so,
Would you share those?
oh, yeah, sure. They are race, color, national origin, religion, sex, age, disability, marital status, public assistance, familial status, domestic violence, and lawful activity. And there's like additional little definitions for some of them.
Okay, Miranda?
I'd like to make just an amendment to my motion and include the word in D to encourage adherence to federal and state laws regarding civil and human rights. Yes, civil and human rights.
So who was the second of this?
I believe I was.
You consider that a friendly amendment?
I
Lois?
do. Now, there would be two places where civil rights are listed. So do you want civil and human rights in both locations?
Yes, in both locations.
Did I do that right?
So there's a motion and second, so it would have to be the agreement of the committee. If nobody objects, you can move forward with the amendment.
And I'll explain why. If nobody
Is there no
objects.
objection to that amendment to the motion? Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
If we're looking at Alderman Janser's revisions, and potentially if we're looking forward at adopting any of his additional wording, in the next section, powers and duties, he references regarding civil and human rights in that paragraph. So by adding it up top, if we intend to potentially use any of the additional verbiage, that would cover that for us. And the fact that what you're holding says, if you'd hold it up for me again, sorry. Labor and human rights for the state of North Dakota. So I believe out of state and federal law, they call them human rights. I could be wrong, not an attorney.
Go ahead.
And so I do have a question behind the intent of the amendment. So the first thing I want to point out too is that in your binder, you also have Alderwoman Evans's revisions to the ordinance, and that is very similar to the goals and objectives that were proposed by Alderman Janser. The only difference is I believe he replaced in subsection B, all people. He replaced all people, that takes the place of for diversity, is the difference that I'm seeing between Alderwoman Evans's revisions and Alderman Janser's revisions.
He also removed the word educate.
And just has promote. That's correct. My second is a question, is that by using the term civil rights and human rights, are you wanting to imply that those are referring to other law? Because Councilwoman Dykeman has a list over there, and my understanding is it's from the Department of Labor's website listing human rights. Are you wanting to reference that as by when you're referring to civil rights and you're referring to human rights, you're referring to the list that committee member Dykeman is referring to? Is it that specific? Is the intent to be that specific behind it? Or, and just something for the committee to ponder. You're having a human relations committee with the appropriate term to be to provide leadership in areas of human relations, not implying a reference to some other law or code or definitions.
If I
I
could,
got Mike, then Travis, then I'll come back to you two.
And so just to clarify, Denise, with what you've got, I believe what you're holding up is what's titled North Dakota Protected Categories. Is that right? So while that is an important document and is what is in state law, I don't think that that's our human rights, correct? We don't have a right to a race. That's not, I just think we're conflating two types of thought there.
Right, now these are the protected categories, and that applies to employment, housing, public accommodation, public service, and credit transactions. So that's what these laws are about in North Dakota Code.
Travis?
I just wanted to comment that I think it's critically important that human rights be added, as that is God-given rights, ultimately, natural law, not civil law, in contrast to what we hear in this room or council or others in the state attempt to impose on individuals. And so absolutely, human rights to me should be added. And it's not something that government doesn't create human rights. We create civil rights.
Okay, Lyanne and then Miranda.
We have to be thinking about this committee going forward, as they probably did in 1976, that this would be up to 2023. I don't want things limited to what is written someplace else currently, such as, because I want this more open, so that if something new does come up, like Miranda said, it's not restricted by something. So if we can be general, and if there is a relationship or behavior that comes forward that we've never seen, I don't want it restricted. So I would like things to be more open, and it can be read by the future committee members and not having to be restricted and controlled by what we're doing today.
Miranda?
so to your question, Stephanie, D says to encourage adherence to federal and state laws regarding, we're talking civil rights and human rights. When you do a quick search, there is a Office of Human Rights in Washington, D.C. The Office of Human Rights enforces several laws that protect individuals from unlawful discrimination. Federal human rights laws are things like the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, and then there is also, let me just back this up, federal civil rights statutes. So by including both of those, if the intent of D is to encourage adherence to both federal and state laws regarding both civil rights and human rights, we'd be covering both.
Any other comments? All right, call the question.
Schuler,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Zablotny,
Yes.
Zeltinger,
Yes.
Blessam,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Dykeman,
Yes.
Olson.
Yes.
Okay, so now we skip to Article 10, Officer Job Descriptions. And I will look for a motion if somebody has one to begin this conversation.
I'll make another motion.
Miranda,
Open
go
it.
ahead. Thanks for doing your homework. It helps us out.
I didn't intend to make a motion here, but in order to open up discussion, I will just make a motion to, again, just adopt the revisions provided by Alderman Janser. Membership, appointment, term, vacancy.
Okay, can I get a second?
One
Oh,
moment.
sorry.
here. Wondering if we need to have another one in there too. I think we also need to include the one below it, 21215, because that addresses how the positions are elected and the terms they serve. So my motion would be to adopt both 2-214 and 2-215 to cover officer jobs and descriptions.
Point of order. I think we are moving off what the agreement was last meeting of how we're going through things, correct? Because if we start into that, membership is actually in Article 4. And if anybody wants to be here to talk about membership, they're not going to be able to. So I don't know how we do it, Miranda, but because now we don't match marks at all. We're really off the track here.
I was just trying to open it up.
No, I'm with you. I know what you're saying.
All right, so we do have a motion. Is there a second?
Oh,
Just to further the conversation, even if you're gonna vote no.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a move in a or motion and a second. Go ahead, Miranda.
I'm glad you seconded it. I'm not sure that I think this is right either, but we need to have the discussion, and without the motion and second, we can't. So,
Okay, who would like to talk? Go ahead, Lisa.
Although I agree with Mike that it doesn't line up exactly because the words are not identical. The intent is there. It is the job responsibilities of the committee as they had been reworded in Alderman Janser's recommendation. So I think that we're still within our realm of responsibility as listed on the agenda to have that conversation.
Alderman Burlingame.
Yes, go ahead.
And maybe we could take a moment, and Miranda, you look like maybe you are already. There may be individual letters that we can grab to deal with Article 10 and make it match what we had agreed and told the public we were going to do.
Anybody else have comments while Miranda's doing some more homework here?
I'll try to help.
Are we going to change, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Are we going to change to co-chair instead of vice chairman? Or are we going to continue that, or is that separate and we're going to keep it?
My answer to you would be, you guys can do whatever you want. This ad hoc committee has co-chairs,
Right.
but the committee going forward, now I'm doing it. Committee, right? You can do whatever you guys feel is appropriate.
Scott?
Yes.
And if I can make the recommendation, because I did bring that up as a point of concern earlier, it's difficult to have co-chairs. So it would be my preference that we had a chair and a vice chair. Scott and I are handling it fine, but I think going forward, I think it's a difficult kind of way to manage a committee.
I think actually, as I look at it, Miranda, please correct me if I'm wrong, I don't actually see Article 10 at all in 214 or 215. Does anybody else find it? I don't see anything related to the role of the chair, vice chair, and secretary in Alderman Janser's language.
I was looking for the same thing.
Yeah, I don't think it's.
Chairman, if I may, looking at 215, it does have some duties that are delegated there, where it talks about meetings will be held as often as deemed by the chair or the vice chair. So those would be duties that would be assigned to those two. The city clerk, I don't know if they would be considered an officer underneath this particular committee or not, but they're delegated the duty of keeping a record of the minutes. And then C, it delegates the duty of the chair to approve the agenda prior to the meeting, preside over the meetings. In the absence of the chair, the vice chair would assume those duties in the chair's absence. And then D, the chair would appoint subcommittee members, subject to confirmation by the committee. So there's some duties that are assigned to officers under 215 of the Janser Amendment.
Hey, Travis.
If I may, I think Article 10 certainly is much more complete and orderly than 2-215. I think it does a much better job of making it simple and identifying what the roles and responsibilities are of those positions.
Mike, I believe you were next.
Yeah, I guess I was just going to ask the city attorney for clarification. Do you think if we acted on 215 B, C, and D, that fits the intent of Article 10?
I think one question you're going to want to decide is what officers do you want to have with the committee? I don't know that all committees necessarily have a secretary, so Article 10.3 refers to a secretary, but under the Janser Amendment 2.215, The secretarial duties, it looks like they're assigned to the city clerk.
And I think we, if I may,
Yep.
if, we may have to, like Article 9 actually lays out the officers, right, in the current ordinance. And so we've left ourselves in a little bit of a pickle here because we can't really address 9. We can't do a 10 without knowing what 9 looks like, and 9 isn't on today's agenda. I'm not sure how we proceed there. One just quick parliamentary thing. In an exchange like this, should I ask to continue? Is that the right way to put that? If we're going back and forth a bit, answering each other's questions?
Yes.
Is that the right way? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Miranda?
I have some suggestions for an alternative motion, but I'm enjoying the conversation because it's helping me make revisions. So I don't know if anybody's got anything more to say. I'll keep working.
Okay. Anybody else have anything else to say on this?
I want to move to suspend this item until next meeting, since it's a little more complicated than what we laid it out to be in terms of the other articles that are involved in it. And that we maybe create another agenda that is more comprehensive in this regard.
And so I feel like we could do that. I think the right process would be to, I suppose you could table it, but we could defeat the motion as it exists now. I think we could go into a discussion for a couple minutes with the rest of our time to try to rearrange or rethink our overall process, because we were trying to do something to make sure the public had a voice here. And so I think that's our aim, but we're now starting to learn and understand what that actually looks like in reality, that these are that especially if we're looking at Alderman Janser's as a baseline, it doesn't even match. We can't even follow the articles. So I guess that would be my suggestion to everybody, is that we hold a vote, we kill this motion, and then we hold a discussion, maybe with a motion now, of how we proceed from here.
So Travis did make a motion, so I want to make sure I honor that. Do we have a second if you want to continue with that?
Isn't there one on the floor?
So the motion is to,
I want to make sure I'm right parliamentarian too. Is there a motion to suspend? Is that the right motion to make, or?
Motion to table would probably be the more accurate motion to make, but that would be how I would interpret the motion that member Zaplotny is making.
So we have a motion on it to, if you're agreeable to this language, to table this issue until a future meeting. Is that correct, Travis?
Yes, and I would be willing to pull that if others would rather take Mike's route.
Okay. Miranda?
I'm going to second that
Okay.
because I think it should be voted on. However, I would support my original motion failing because I would make a second motion. When you said we could have discussion, we technically cannot have discussion outside of a motion and a second. So if the two motions on the table were to fail, I am prepared to make another one so we can continue discussion.
So the motion to table would take precedence. So that would be the motion that would be voted on first by the body.
Any other discussion on that motion? Okay, so the motion to table will take, so if this passes, does that just end this discussion for the night then?
It
Can
tables the matter until, I assume the next meeting is when you want to table it for. So it would place the item on the next agenda, and the motion on the floor would remain council or chair, committee member Schuler's motion.
All right, so go ahead.
It's a point of order. Well, I appreciate the willingness for everyone to second everyone else's motion, so there can be discussion. Oftentimes, if someone makes a motion, it's okay for a motion to die for a lack of a second, if that's not what you want to proceed with, just so the body knows for future motions.
Okay. Any other conversation on this one?
I would like to hear what Miranda has to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Good.
Oh.
Ready to vote?
well, just one real quick thing, Seth. I think for me, I would rather see us let both of these die. We're not going to let this whole thing go anywhere. We're going to be getting back through it. I think we should clean up our motion list right now, get off of that, so we can begin afresh with a new thought process. So I would say let both of these die in sequential order.
I would tend to agree. So with that, I'm going to call the question.
Zablotny,
No.
I just need to confirm we are doing the table Article 10,
Yes.
correct? Okay. Zeltinger,
No.
Blessam,
No.
Burlingame,
No.
Dykeman,
No.
Olson,
No.
Schuler,
Nope.
Staley.
No.
Motion.
Motion fails.
Fails. Okay, so now we're on to the other motion, which was Miranda's original motion when we began this. Is there anybody else that has any other conversation on that at this point? Okay, call the question.
Schuler,
Nope.
Staley,
No.
Zablotny,
No.
Zeltinger,
No.
Blessam,
No.
Burlingame,
No.
Dykeman,
No.
Olson.
No.
Motion fails.
All right, that motion fails. Do we have a new motion?
I do.
Miranda.
Yeah. So we're going to follow the Article 10, and I'll go line by line so that you guys can keep up. Article 10 would be officer job description. Number 1, the chairperson shall. Keeping A.
Point of order,
preside-
is this a motion?
This is a motion, yep.
Okay.
I'm just going to go read through, so. A, preside over and conduct all meetings, we'd be keeping that the same. B, would prepare the agenda prior to meetings. I assume that the agenda is prepared by the chairperson. C, appoint subcommittees as necessary to carry out the work of the HRC, just adding the word sub there. Striking D completely. E, refer tasks to the appropriate subcommittees for action, adding the word sub. Striking F completely. And moving over to 2-214, letter D, replacing it with that. If a vacancy occurs, an appointment to fill the unexpired term shall be made in the manner in which the original appointments were made. So then the appointment would be made, I believe, by the council, if that's the way we're doing it, rather than the committee appointing for their own members. Then we move on to 2, the vice chair shall. A, leaving that the same, assume the duties of the chairperson during his or her absence. B, perform other duties as directed by the chair. For 3, for secretary, we strike that entire A through D. And we go to 2-215, letter B. The city clerk shall keep a record of all Human Relations Committee minutes, and the city clerk would act as the secretary. And then moving on to 4, where it discusses the parliamentarian. This one, I would prefer, if it's possible, to continue to keep someone from the city's legal office to serve on this committee to make sure it is following the letters of the law. So the parliamentarian be a member of the existing City of Minot legal team. And that would be my motion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Member Schuler and a second by Alderwoman Olson. And Mike, you are recognized.
So Miranda, if I could just get a clarification from you of how are we, I want to make sure I understand how we're working the documents right now. So did we fix Division 4, right? If anybody can see that. Division 4 at the top of the document is all we addressed, and we did Article 1. Is that right?
Okay, so when you say division,
So in the current ordinance, Division 4, and we did Article 1, which is the name, correct? So my point is here, we're working from the prior document, and actually now we're still in there. We're using a little of Alderman Janser's language, but we're still completely inside the current ordinance document.
correct.
Okay.
Keeping letter 10 the same, just making those minor revisions and adopting specifically the vacancy, which was the D out of 2-214. And then the city clerk, which would be letter B in 2-215, serving as the quote-unquote secretary. We don't have to call it a secretary, though. We could just take the wording for the B.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't, actually starting to get both documents going at once. We're still fully in the current ordinance, which
Fully
is
in the
great.
current,
So we know
just-
where we're at. That's good.
Using that other document just so you guys can see the changes that were made.
Yep.
Scott?
Yes.
And I know our time is running short, and I'm going to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench in, but this actually was a recommendation made by Alderman Janser. I'm not sure if you were able to see all of what he presented to us, but his recommendation was to repeal the current ordinance and to replace it with what we're looking at. And I would make that recommendation tonight as well, to repeal the ordinance, because I think it is getting really confusing. I think we are all in agreement that we will continue the work and that we will continue to work through these, but it's going to be easier to be working through one document. And it seems like we have started down the road of using Alderman Janser's recommendations. Obviously, we have the freedom to make changes to that at our future meetings. But my recommendation would be that we repeal the current ordinance.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, my only comment, I agree, and I think that is where we should go. My question would be, with what we agreed to in terms of making sure the public has advance notice, we just want to make sure we adjust how we're doing agendas and so they know what's coming, right?
And-
I think that's what we'd want to do.
And my suggestion would be we vote on this motion, or we can table this motion because we are 4 minutes away from adjournment here. But there could be another motion that become our new starting point, starting with the agenda for the next meeting if somebody chooses to do so.
So moved.
Okay. So, sorry, I'm going to ask a parliamentarian question. So is our best bet to vote on the current motion and then make a second motion?
I don't, was that a second to Chair, did you make a motion?
I did not, and it.
Okay. I
And just,
didn't-
and so,
Okay.
a quick clarification.
That wasn't my
I know that we
impression.
do not have the authority to repeal, as I was saying that word. We, as this body, do not have the authority to repeal. My suggestion, I guess, is to go off of one document. That's probably clearer.
Okay, so then the business before the body is the motion that Chair, Councilperson Schuler has made. Sorry, it's the end of the day.
Yes. We are 3 minutes away. So let's continue to work on this motion, and then we can discuss that next. And that shouldn't take too long, I don't think.
Yeah,
Go
so
ahead.
quickly, we're in the same spot again. I think our cleanest bet is to kill this motion, vote no on it, and to start clean, heading through Alderman Janser's text.
I would agree.
I know.
All right.
I just play devil's advocate. If we were to do that and just use the revisions that Alderman Janser provided as our guidance for continuing this, I have some concerns that we're just adopting something. I would prefer we do something on our own. And I feel like it would also be a disservice to Alderwoman Evans' potential revisions that we also have in front of us.
Go ahead.
I prefer to work in the original document and edit it as we go, like we're doing. I think that's working fine.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question?
Of
Are
course.
we able to take these binders home to look over before our next meeting? So
Yes.
I think that wouldn't be fair. I agree with both of the two prior.
Okay. So that's, as we have 2 minutes left, is there any other final comments on the motion in front of us by committee member Schuler? All right, call the vote.
Schuler,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Zablotny,
Clarify the motion, please. Is this the motion to change the language?
Of 10.
This was the motion to change to my suggestions.
Gotcha. No.
Zeltinger,
No.
Blessam,
No.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Dykeman,
Yes.
Olson,
No.
we have a tie.
We have a tie. I don't know what to do. Motion
It fails for lack of a majority.
Okay, thank you. This isn't my first meeting I have ever chaired, I promise. I just have never had that happen. Okay, so with 1 minute left on the clock, does somebody want to make a motion on Alderwoman Olson's suggestion that we work off of the other of Alderman Janser's proposal.
Can I make another motion that we move this item to the next meeting and
Okay.
adjourn this meeting?
Is a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. With us at 1 minute away, I'm going to call the question. Go ahead.
Schuler,
Yes.
Staley,
Yes.
Zablotny,
Yes.
Zeldinger,
Yes.
Blessam,
Yes.
Burlingame,
Yes.
Dykeman,
Yes.
Olson.
All right. Motion passed. So with that, can I get a motion to adjourn?
One quick item, one quick item. If people want to add something to the agenda, they should let Scott or I know by September 6th so that we can add items to the next agenda. And our next meeting is September 12th.
May I ask a question? Sorry. I know we were asked in the last meeting, people weren't going to be available at certain times. Did we ever get a resolve on any changes? Because I know I wasn't going to be available on that late September meeting.
I believe that we had a majority for each, or a quorum for
Oh, you
each
did?
meeting. So
Okay.
we'll leave with the dates that were presented.
Okay.
And with that, the meeting is adjourned.